cop who put his badge on the line for justice.
You know the name Doug Poppa?
Yes, I do. God bless Doug Poppa, an honest cop.
I was elated, of course, but then as he testified, I was somewhat concerned for him, because I knew that they were probably going to crucify that man.
Sometimes the truth has a price. That may be the lesson of a Virginia police officer who says, in trying to do the right thing, he ended up paying for it.
The message you're sending is, see, we did it, Doug. You don't come out, you don't buck the system. No matter what the reason is, you just can basically keep your mouth shut. But if I wouldn't do it all over again, I would take the badge and I would leave it on somebody's desk and get out of police work. Because the day I can't tell the truth because somebody's pressuring me, and the day the system doesn't want me to tell the truth because somebody's pressuring me, is the day I'd leave the badge on the desk and walk away.
Poppa was fired for insubordination. One man who confronted truth and consequences.
From Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Doug Poppa, Truth and Consequences Podcast. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's Tuesday, March 29, 2022. The time is 21:44 hours from Las Vegas, Nevada. This is episode 106 of Truth and Consequences Podcast. I'm your host, Doug Poppa. If you remember from 105, I displayed some new documents that I believe never saw the public light before. And I cut the podcast off about an hour. There's a couple of things I wanted to hit on that I didn't because it would just go a little bit lengthy. So we're going to see some stuff today in this podcast. Again, the topic is mainly retired Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department Under Sheriff Kevin McMahill, who's one of the candidates running for the office of Clark County Sheriff. If he wins the election, that would make him the commander, the head of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. And as I said before in several podcasts, and I'm going to keep saying this, Kevin McMahill is a dirtbag. He is a documented liar, not only from what I've said and proven on articles and in other podcasts with stuff that I exposed, but he's a documented liar, was proven to be untruthful in 1995 by the Internal Affairs Bureau investigation, when he and Officer William Stoops, back in 1995, had a female named Carrie Lance in their custody, stopped detaining her. Kevin McMahill, according to the Internal Affairs Bureau reports that I displayed in episode 102, told her to show them her vagina. She lifted up her skirt, and she did that. And then Officer Stoops, with Kevin McMahill standing there, the man that wants to be sheriff of Clark County, Officer Stoops forced her to eat a rock of cocaine. And there was another police officer there, a female, Jennifer Clampett, and I talked about her yesterday. I think yesterday the podcast came out in episode 105. I'm going to hit on something else again with that because I wanted to say something yesterday, and I didn't do it in the podcast because I cut it off pretty quick. So Kevin McMahill, under sheriff, retired, wants to be the next sheriff of Clark County, and he wants to be the man who's going to run the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department if he wins the election. And like I said, he is a documented liar, and he's a documented pervert, because the Internal Affairs Bureau investigation sustained the charges against him. Untruthfulness, he failed the polygraph, he was deceptive, he asked Carrie Lance to show her her vagina, and the other officer forced her to eat crack cocaine. I already hit on that in episodes 102 and 105. If you're not familiar with what I'm talking about here, because I'm not going to rehash everything I said, I'll be here for hours, go back and look at episodes 102 and 105, the Truth and Consequences with Doug Poppa podcast YouTube channel. Now, to put some things into perspective that I'm talking about here, I'm going to play a video. This video is an excerpt of Kevin McMahill speaking at a fundraiser in November of 2021. And it's only a couple of seconds long. I want you to listen to what he's saying, and then I'll discuss it.
I know how to lead, I know how to motivate, I know how to inspire the men and women of Metro. I've done it my entire career. 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 I've done it my entire career.
Okay. That's Kevin McMahill, documented liar, documented pervert. You heard him tell that crowd. I know how to lead, I know how to inspire, and I know how to motivate. I've done it my entire career. I've done it my entire career. The words came out of his mouth. Yes, Mr. McMahill, documented liar, documented pervert. You sure know how to lead, and you sure know how to inspire. You told a woman to show her your vagina, and the other officer forced her to eat crack cocaine. Your inspiration should go down in history. Now, I also brought this up in episode 105 and 102. It's not only because of this, because I say this guy's a dirtbag, he shouldn't be running for sheriff of anything. He shouldn't even be a police officer. He shouldn't have been on that department for 30 years. But that was Jerry Keller's call, and I've still got people talking to me and find out what the hell happened with that. But Kevin McMahill, like I said, on the department, even when he was in the administration of former Sheriff Doug Gillespie, which I'm going to get to in a second, he covered things up for Gillespie. He covered things up as Joe Lombardo's undersheriff. He was complicit in all of Joe Lombardo's cover-ups. And I explained that. I'm going to hit on a couple of them over here in this podcast a little bit later. But you heard him say that. He knows how to lead. He knows how to inspire. He knows how to motivate. Yes, by not only what he did in 1995, but in an upcoming podcast, you're going to see his derogatory comments that he made and other cops made. He thought they were funny, calling a female officer cunt, camel toes, snail trail, referring to her sweating in her groin area during a PT exercise or something. You're going to hear about that. I didn't cover that yet, but you can hear about that in the future. So this is a guy that wants to be sheriff, and that's what he told that crowd at the fundraiser in November of 2021. Now, let's go back to something that I showed yesterday on the screen, and it was put it up on the screen here for a second. Okay. I'll get me back up on the screen in a second. But that's the Las Vegas Review-Journal article from November 28th, 1995. Let me get that banner off there for a second so you can see what's going on. And I'll put that over here. And hang on one second. I want to get me back up in this box. Over there. Okay. Now, I was going to mention this yesterday, and I forgot to mention it, okay? He is an embarrassment to the police department today, and he was an embarrassment to the police department in 1995. You heard Captain Steve Franks when I read what he wrote in his memo to the undersheriff. He said it was an embarrassment. Now, we go into this article over here. I got a couple of things highlighted. I'm just going to hit on again. And it's discussing Officer Kevin McMahill, 27, is scheduled for his pre-termination hearing on Wednesday. Okay. Next thing, we got Greg McCurdy making a comment saying only that a recommendation will be forwarded to Sheriff Jerry Keller. Again, this is from November 28th, 1995, Las Vegas Review-Journal article. Okay. This is important here. The Metropolitan Police Department last week reached a $44,900 settlement with the 30-year-old woman, Carrie Lance, who complained of the officer's conduct. Listen to this. Said Ted Farrell, F-A-R-R-E-L-L, director of the department's risk management office. This is what Mr. Farrell told the newspaper back in 1995, quote, "We felt it was in the best interest of the department to settle the claim," he said. I'll read that again for my audio podcast people that don't see this up on the screen. This is Ted Farrell in 1995 telling the Las Vegas Review-Journal he was the director of the department's risk management office, and this is what he said, quote, "We felt it was in the best interest of the department to settle the claim," he said. Now, why am I bringing it up again? Because like I said, Kevin McMahill is still perpetrating the lie that he was investigated and cleared of those 3 charges back in 1995. The 3 charges: conduct unbecoming an officer, neglect of duty, and untruthfulness, because he was deceptive on the polygraph, and that's what he was charged with. And I said yesterday in the other podcast in 102 that the only person that was there, didn't participate in this, was Jennifer Clampett. She didn't participate with what William Stoops and Kevin McMahill were doing to the woman. She took a polygraph, she reported it to her supervisors, and then she reported it to the Internal Affairs Bureau, and she came back truthful on a polygraph. And once again, I'll say it again, the Internal Affairs Bureau sergeant at the time, Mark Tavares, who investigated this back in 1995, and you saw the documents up on the screen the other day, his results of his Internal Affairs Bureau investigation was that the charges were sustained, and he said he interviewed Carrie Lance. She corroborated the events, as Jennifer Clampett told the Internal Affairs investigator, him, and she also took a polygraph, Clampett, and she passed. So I read this article just now because that's the title of my podcast. He was an embarrassment to the police department, and it was in the best interest of the police department to settle the lawsuit because Kevin McMahill is still perpetrating this freaking lie, like I said, to the press, to the public, whoever he talks to the union members the other day when they interviewed him, saying he was cleared. Ladies and gentlemen, he was never cleared of these charges. Just because he wasn't fired, because Sheriff Jerry Kell at the time decided for whatever reason not to fire him, okay, that doesn't mean he was cleared of the charges. The charges were sustained. The pre-termination hearing can't overturn charges that were already investigated by the Internal Affairs Bureau. So he is a continual liar. And here we have it again, further corroboration from Ted Farrell back in 1995, talking to the Las Vegas Review-Journal. It was in the best interest of the department to settle the claim. Not him, not anybody has ever said he wasn't found guilty of those charges, the departmental charges, and he remained on the department. So further corroboration over here. Now I want to hit on for a minute. I want to go back to, we saw this the other day. Let me get up on the screen. Okay. This was we talked about that in episode 105. September 13th, 1995. That was the memo that then Captain Steve Franks sent to Deputy Chief McKee. And I read it yesterday. In essence, what he's saying, he found this conduct atrocious, meaning Stoops and McMahill's actions with Carrie Lance, atrocious, idiotic, but, and the last paragraph you see over there on the bottom part of that, where I got it circled in yellow, he says, and this was an embarrassment to our department. Now, in this first part of this memo, Captain Steve Franks at the time was basically putting a lot of stuff on Jennifer Clampett, saying that she stood by and she didn't take any action, okay? And they actually were going to bring her up on a charge that I talked about yesterday. So this is important because of what he's going after Jennifer Clampett for. And then he says it wouldn't have happened had Jennifer Clampett would have said something and told the woman, you don't have to do the dress and this is not right. Well, there is some truth to that. But what he doesn't say in that memo is that had there not been 2 dirtbag pieces of trash wearing a Metro Police uniform and a badge on the department in 1995, and I'm talking about Kevin McMahill and William Stoops, they are the ones that terrorized, harassed Carrie Lance, not Jennifer Clampett. So if they weren't on the department because of their character and the way they were, to come out and say, listen, show me your vagina and I'll give you the wine back. That's what the investigation proved, Kevin McMahill said. And then he stood by while William Stoops forced Carrie Lance to eat crack cocaine. Yes, Jennifer Clampett didn't intervene. And I told yesterday, and we'll hear it again today, why Franks later says why he believes she didn't intervene. And I have a remark I want to say on that. So anyway, we got that up. Now let's go to part 2 that I didn't have on the screen yesterday because it didn't fit, but get this up over here. And I read this yesterday in the, let me take my thing off here for a second so you could see it, okay? And I read this yesterday, and it says, they originally discussed, meaning Captain Steve Franks, Lieutenant Stavros Anthony, of charging Clampett with the violation of LVMPD policy 4105.16, which basically says if something happens when you're working, you can read on screen, read it yesterday, I'm not going to read the whole thing again, that you have to report it. But then he goes on to say, this charge was rejected as Lieutenant Anthony and I, along with your consent, and this he's talking to Undersheriff Wingett, believe she, meaning Clampett, may have been frightened to report these incidents to our sergeant. And then he goes on to say, you got to remember, in that first page that we just looked at, after the incident happened, McMahill, Steve Franks said it again, McMahill and Stoops threatened Carrie Lance. They said, you're one of us now. You report it, in essence, you go down, we go down. So they threatened her. The guy who wants to be the sheriff of Clark County, who's running right now, threatened a female police officer, said, if you go down, we go down. Okay? Just want to make that point. So then he goes on in here and he says, the charge was rejected as Lieutenant Anthony and I, along with your consent, believe she may have been frightened to report these incidents to our sergeant. Now, she did. She reported them a few weeks later, okay? As inconceivable as it is to me that a police officer could be so intimidated or frightened by their fellow officers that they would be moved to inaction boggles my mind. Well, it can boggle his mind all he wanted, because if I was talking to Steve Franks today, I says, decades, go back for decades, how many times have we heard where police officers, both male and female, were afraid to report incidents of corruption and misconduct by their colleagues because either they were threatened or they felt they would be retaliated against. But he doesn't say that in here. He's putting it all on her. It wasn't her fault. Jennifer Clampett is not the one that told Carrie Lance, lift up your skirt and show me your vagina. Jennifer Clampett was not the one who told her to eat the rock of cocaine and you won't go to jail. That was William Stoops, dirtbag, and Kevin McMahill, dirtbag, the guy that wants to be the next sheriff of Clark County. Pervert, documented pervert by the police in their report. Documented liar. Okay? So I just want to bring that up. Now, being that was Captain Steve Franks, I keep digging through the old files, and let me say this. Now, this incident with Jennifer Clampett happened in 1995, in the summer of 1995, okay, with her witnessing McMahill and Stoops, what they did to Carrie Lance, terrorized that woman, okay? I don't care if she was a prostitute or not, okay? She's a human being, okay? Now this is the guy that said that Clampett, he even says it up on the top, you could see it over here. Let me take myself off here so you can see it over there. He says, Officer Clampett had an excellent opportunity to demonstrate moral courage and leadership, and she failed. Well, obviously, he didn't take his own advice, Captain Steve Franks, because 1 year later, ladies and gentlemen, in 1986, then Captain Steve Franks' integrity came into question, and he was investigated by the Internal Affairs Bureau for allegations of forgery and fraud involving performance evaluations. And he was demoted from the rank of captain to the rank of lieutenant and given a 3-week suspension. I'm not going to get into the whole thing because Steve Franks is, he's not running for sheriff. Kevin McMahill, a documented pervert and documented liar, is running for sheriff of Clark County because he wants to run and head the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. But my point being is He's criticizing in 1995 Jennifer Clampett that if she had some leadership skills, she would have intervened and done something. But obviously his leadership and his moral courage was in the gutter because he got busted. And Franks was the first captain in the history of the Las Vegas Metro Police Department to be demoted in rank. And what I just said has also been confirmed through police sources who have talked to me. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen, on that one. Now, I've been talking about cover-ups. I explained them. Prior sheriffs who've had alleged affairs with their female subordinates that led to domestic violence incidents. Another former sheriff who was a notorious drunk, fell out of a chair once even, from what sources are telling me who were there at a staff meeting, fell out of a chair, and allegedly was over a hotel, off-duty, and so drunk he was having a sexual encounter with a female hotel employee in one of the elevators, and the freaking idiot forgot to realize that there was a surveillance camera in the hotel filming the whole thing, and I was told by sources that somehow that surveillance video made its way to some members of Metro who still have it, and anyway, I want to bring that up. What I'm talking about here, people, is this is the leadership of Metro for years, okay? Sheriffs having affairs with female subordinates that led to domestic violence incidents over their home that were covered up, okay? And I'm going to talk about, the one I'm talking about on here is the domestic violence incident, I'm going to get to that in a minute, that happened with former Sheriff Doug Gillespie. Doug Gillespie was the sheriff who didn't want to run for another term and endorsed his buddy Joe Lombardo. Now, before I get to anything here, let me put something up on the screen here. Okay. This is the organizational chart from 2010-2011. And there you have up on the top, that's Sheriff Doug Gillespie at the time. And I highlighted a couple people here, and I'm going to tell you why I did it. The first one on the left-hand side says Assistant Sheriff Joe Lombardo. He was the Assistant Sheriff under Doug Gillespie. On the bottom, we have Deputy Chief, guess who? Documented pervert, documented liar, Kevin McMahill. Then we have Assistant Sheriff Ted Moody. We have Assistant Sheriff Ray Flynn. And then Assistant Sheriff Greg McCurdy. Now, like I said yesterday, according to sources, Greg McCurdy, he was the spokesman in 1995. He was a sergeant at the time. And according to sources, the words sexual harassment were not in his vocabulary when he was on the police department. So I'm going to say about him, because he's retired and he's freaking gone. But I'm bringing it up so you get a picture of leadership and command people through the years on the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. Now, I'm going to get to Ray Flynn and Ted Moody and Joe Lombardo and dirtbag Kevin McMahill, pervert and liar. I get to him in a second. There's a reason why I got this up on the screen. Now, let's do this here for a second so you get a picture of who these people want, a clearer picture here. Okay, let me get me off the screen here for a second. Okay. What we have here is a picture around 2010, 2011. In the front, that's then Sheriff Doug Gillespie. And in the back, to his left, so if this camera's right, you see who retired as Assistant Sheriff Todd Fasulo. And then on the other side, you see Kevin McMahill. Okay? These were people in Sheriff Gillespie's command structure and remained in the command structure when Sheriff Gillespie supported Joe Lombardo for sheriff. And I explained that the other day. And Lombardo got all the money from the casinos and the business, and he becomes sheriff. Okay? According to sources, and I'm going to get into this in another podcast, the night of the Las Vegas massacre, Assistant Sheriff Todd Fasulo and Under Sheriff Kevin McMahill were under the influence of alcohol when they arrived on the scene. Okay? So bad that everybody was smelling the alcohol on their breath. Now, that was a Sunday night. You're going to say, well, there's nothing wrong with that. They were off. They heard what went on, they got called, they got beeped, and they responded. But people, even high-ranking officials who spoke to me, said they reeked of alcohol when they arrived on the scene. Okay, but the problem is, Kevin McMahill lives in Henderson. Fasulo lives up there in the Northwest somewhere. They got into their cruiser, their unmarked vehicle, to respond to the scene and had weapons on them when they arrived. Now, so if they're under the influence, they drive in a vehicle. And this is what sources, multiple sources have told me who were associating with these people when they arrived on the scene that night. But they also had their weapons on. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a crime. Get me back up on the screen here. It is a crime in the state of Nevada and most other states to be in possession of a weapon on your person and be under the influence of alcohol. Anyway, that's what my sources are saying. Any one of these guys, I did reach out to, you'll hear me say that I reached out to Gillespie some time ago when I wrote the story, which you'll hear in a second for the Baltimore Post-Examiner. But any of these people have an open mic anytime they want to come on and give me their side and say, listen, your people that told me that I was drunk that night at the massacre and was under the influence of alcohol was wrong because I wasn't. Kevin McMahill, I've been asking for an interview with him and Lombardo. So I'm just putting that out because what this shows, ladies and gentlemen, is a pattern of misconduct, piss-poor leadership, and when I get into this other stuff, serious corruption, cover-ups to protect people on the Department of High Rank, including the sheriffs themselves that engaged in this conduct. So I said my little piece on that. Okay. Before we get there, I want to quickly, now you know what, maybe I'll do that towards the end. Okay. I explained about a domestic violence incident that occurred at Gillespie's house. I believe it was in 2009. Now I'm putting this up on the screen here. You know what I'm going to do first? No, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to play a video. In 2010, when Sheriff Doug Gillespie was running for re-election, he was supposed to have a debate with a female police officer named Lori Bish, who was also running for sheriff. He didn't show up the night of the debate, but a YouTube video was posted later on, and you're going to hear it here, and I want you to listen to what, it's only a couple minutes long, I think it's 3 or 4 minutes, but I'm going to play it, and I want you to listen to it. I'm going to take me off the screen so you could see the full video, and I'll get me back up here as soon as it's over. Okay, let's back up over here. I'm going to play this. Listen to this, folks. Very interesting.
I'll ask a question. This question is a hypothetical. What the most important thing for a candidate for sheriff is the character trait of integrity. That's the most important thing. Also, I think critical thinking is an important character trait. So I'd like to ask you a hypothetical. How would you handle this situation as sheriff of Clark County? Now, it's come to your attention that one of the Metro employees had an inappropriate relationship with a female police officer, which was a subordinate to that person. And it developed into a domestic violence event at that person's residence, where when 2 Metro police officers responded, based on their investigation that an act of domestic violence had occurred, they attempted to make an arrest. But this employee, they were not successful because the employee said he was of such high rank that they did not have the authority to make the arrest. In other words, that this person was above the law. Now, additionally, the event number that was assigned to that event was deleted, mysteriously disappeared. And lastly, the female subordinate involved, or in question, was promoted. Now, this came to your attention. How would you address that situation?
The 7-point star is everything that stands for integrity. When we hire onto the police department, we have an obligation to be truthful, to be honest, and to do what's right. That isn't a hypothetical story. That's an absolute true story, and I think those of us who know that's a true story. And I won't mention any names, but I can tell you right now, per NRS, there's only 3 people who can arrest the sheriff, and that is the coroner, the district attorney, and Catherine Cortez Masto, the attorney general. That is, when we talk about transparency, and we talk about being open, and we talk about being honest with the public that we're here to serve, that is a call that did come out at the sheriff's house. And the event was changed. It was changed from an original domestic violence call, and 6 hours later, it was reported as a burglary alarm. Where's the integrity? Where's the integrity for everybody who responded to that call? It wasn't 1 person, it wasn't 2 people, it was a lot of people. And if it wasn't a domestic violence call, then why in the world did the domestic violence lieutenant get called out on his day off to show up? I'm just using a little bit of common sense here. We had another situation, 2 weeks ago, where a high-ranking person was involved in a domestic violence at his house. If that was anybody of, a regular police officer, civilian, even sergeants or lieutenants, we would have been booked in jail, and so would anybody else in this room. The fact that special favors were given is not acceptable. There is a level of accountability that we have to hold ourselves to, especially in law enforcement. There's an old adage, if you do the crime, you should do the time. And there is no person on our department more important to set the example than the sheriff. And in this case, they didn't. And they think that they got away with something, but I think there's other folks that are looking into this at a much higher level than we are. And let's hope that the truth comes out.
Okay, there you have it, folks. Very disturbing. Now, what Lori Bish said was 100% true. I wrote 2 stories for the Baltimore Post-Examiner. I'm going to get them up on the screen here in a second. Okay, there's one. That was from February 2nd of 2016, and it was titled, was that number 2? Was that the first one or the second one? Okay, that's the second one. Let's get the first one up on the screen here. Okay. First one I wrote for the Baltimore Post-Examiner was on February 2nd, 2016, and titled, Was a Nevada Sheriff Above the Law? I talked to police sources who confirmed years before what you heard Lori Bish say in 2010 while she was running for sheriff. This incident happened, okay? Just as Jerry Keller's domestic violence complaint over his house was covered up when he was sheriff back in the 90s. Well, we're moving forward now to around 2009, I believe, when the incident happened over Gillespie's house. What Lori Bish said was confirmed to me by multiple police sources years ago, which I wrote that first story. Now, I wrote a second story, this one, okay? Baltimore Post-Examiner, see the byline? Was a Nevada sheriff, Las Vegas cover-up allegations surface involving another incident. And I wrote that story on October 16th of 2016. Now, here's an excerpt from that story. I'll put into context what I'm going to talk about here in a second. Okay, let me get me off the screen here for a second so you could see it. And I'll just read it. There, okay? This is an excerpt from that second story. One current member of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department who spoke to the Baltimore Post-Examiner under the condition of anonymity recently confirmed what Lori Bish had said. The officer claimed several high-ranking officers, including deputy chiefs, were involved in this incident. The officer said employees were threatened and remained silent in fear of losing their jobs. In a second, I want to get me back up on the screen here. The original event number was deleted from the 9/11 Communications Center computers, and along with it, all the information relating to the original call, the officer said. Another event number was generated for a fictitious call of an alarm at the sheriff's home. the officer said, the one who was talking to me at the time. This officer said alleged domestic violence call was replaced with the bogus incident. And it says Doug Gillespie could not be reached for comment. Sheriff Joe Lombardo was promoted in 2011 to assistant sheriff by then Gillespie. Lombardo ran for sheriff in 2014 when Gillespie announced he wouldn't be running for a third term. Doug Gillespie supported Lombardo during the campaign. Okay, let me back on the full screen here. Okay, so where am I going with this? This just is another thing that proves what people were telling me over the years and what I've been talking about with these cover-ups, the corruption and the misconduct, because that's exactly what this is. This was, ladies and gentlemen, it's pure corruption. Okay, what they did here was so bad. Okay, when Lori Bish said that event numbers were changed, okay, they were changed. Okay, Kevin McMahill was a deputy chief. Lombardo was assistant sheriff. All those people were fully aware of what happened. They were all involved in the cover-up. Now, I put an organizational chart up there earlier. I'm not going to put it up again, but one of the people on that chart was Assistant Sheriff Ray Flynn. Now, Ray Flynn retired, and he died. He committed suicide, I think, last year. And Ray Flynn, at the time this happened, was in charge of the 9/11 Communications Center. Okay? I received information from sources within the Las Vegas Metro Police Department when I wrote those stories that Ray Flynn was the one who was involved and pretty much threatened people dispatchers who were working that night. And the event number, listen to this, ladies and gentlemen, just like I said in that little excerpt I just read from what the cop told me, okay? The event number in the computer-aided dispatch system was deleted, which was the original domestic violence call at the sheriff's home in the northwest part of the Las Vegas Valley. A lot of people were there, just like Lori Bish said. Higher-ups, police officers responded, and what happened was the event number was deleted out of the 9/11 computer-aided dispatch system, okay? They destroyed evidence. Then what they did is they issued another event number and made it look like there was an alarm going off at the sheriff's house to cover the officers and everybody that went there, okay? Is destruction of evidence, police records. This was a major cover-up. And nothing happened with this. Now, I'm going to tell you something else that happened. In 2011, a police source gave me one of the event numbers, okay? In here, I turned that event number over because there was an FBI agent, special agent from the Las Vegas division of the FBI office, who we were talking about other stuff, and this thing with Gillespie came up in discussion, and he told me, can you get one or both of those event numbers? And I did. And I turned it over to the FBI special agent. This was in 2010, I believe, beginning of 2011, and turned it over to him. Now, obviously, it's 2022, and nothing happened. And that's why when I say in some of these podcasts that Las Vegas Metro police officers who spoke to me say they don't trust the FBI out here, the FBI Las Vegas division, not only because of what happened with the Morley Mall and the police corruption investigation years ago, because no cops were indicted. Morley Mall, Jamal Rashid, that's his regular name, street name, longtime Las Vegas pimp for years, was given one charge by the U.S. Attorney, Nick Trutanich, and about 2 years ago, and one charge, no cops, was supposedly on his payroll, protecting him and going after rival pimps, and that's a whole other podcast I'm going to be doing, but the point being is this, okay? What happened with the Gillespie incident, ladies and gentlemen, is 100% full-blown corruption. And higher-ups and sources told me, just like I showed on that organizational chart, Lombardo was assistant sheriff, McMahill was deputy chief. They were all aware of this, and in one form or another, they were all involved in that cover-up. Now, sources just told me just the other day that the night after, at roll call the next day, let me put it that way, after the incident happened at Sheriff Gillespie's house, Assistant Sheriff Ted Moody, who was later promoted to undersheriff, and he's now retired, He went to the roll call briefing at the Northwest Area Command and told police officers, you were never there last night. Didn't happen. In essence, I'm taking out of context what they said, because the sheriff wasn't there because he was out of town. And of course, you're basically threatening the people. You keep your mouth shut and happen. Now, people say, how can something like this happen? Because, ladies and gentlemen, from talking to police sources for years, these things happen consistently because they get away with it. So I wanted to bring that up because I've been talking about on podcast domestic violence, and you heard Lori Bish say, and she said there was another high-ranking official who his domestic violence was covered up. So, this is what's going on the police department, ladies and gentlemen, out here for years. We do not need a sheriff like Kevin McMahill, who was complicit in these cover-ups with Gillespie and then with Joe Lombardo, who was a documented liar and a documented pervert, okay? And he's endorsed by Lombardo, just like these other sheriffs were. They've all had problems. They keep endorsing one another, and like I said, the circle just keeps going around and around. We have to break that circle at this election. We have to. We have to. Now, when that video appeared on YouTube, and I don't even know if it's still up, but I downloaded it many years ago, a couple of people made some remarks, citizens. I'm going to read some of them because they're absolutely correct. One person said, I thought most people who knew of it just kind of swept it under the carpet as the sheriff had wanted. Hands down to Lori Bish for bringing it up. No leader of any department should be allowed to just sweep something like this under the carpet, as did Gillespie. She's totally correct. Another person, I know what an oath is. It is your word, a solemn vow before Almighty God. And in the case of our current sheriff, Douglas C. Gillespie, an oath to support and defend the Constitution of these United States. You, sir, swore this oath, and like many of our time, have shamed yourself and abused the power that was entrusted to you by the hard-working sovereign citizens of the state of Nevada. Another woman. Tell us, Sheriff, what is the difference between a common street thug and an elected official when it comes to a particular crime? While it may be true the thug takes an oath to his ilk, at least we are not paying him to commit his crimes via our tax dollars. You gave us your word. You chose to freely take an oath to support and defend the U.S. Constitution, and you freely have chosen to dishonor that oath. Shame on you, sir. And I got one more last one over here, just another one. This just makes me sick to my stomach. This was from a female. Where is the justice for the sheriff's wife? For the other, quote, high-ranking person's wife. For way too many times, domestic violence doesn't end with one incident, but in many cases with the death of the victim. This needs to be looked into by someone, please, before it is too late. Well, we know what happened. Wasn't looked into by anybody, okay? Nobody looked into it. The FBI was aware of this because I gave them one of those event numbers in 2010. I know that other police officers had spoken to them, including about this incident, and 10 years later, and nothing happened. And that's why I said, that's why police officers have they say the FBI division out here in the U.S. Attorney's Office is a freaking joke because this pattern of systemic corruption and cover-ups has been going on for decades within the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, and it doesn't stop. We cannot have a sheriff elected who is a documented pervert, a documented liar, and he himself was complicit in many cover-ups during his tenure. He's talking to that group back in November, how great he was. I have all this. And during my time, during your time, you've covered things up. You've put your name on termination orders and suspension orders and discipline orders for police officers, Mr. McMahill. And I said this the other day, for offenses far less than what you were sustained with on those charges, conduct unbecoming an officer, neglect of duty, and being untruthful. and you sign other people's disciplinary forms and termination papers for things that you did were far greater, you are a freaking disgrace. And it's only going to get worse because I got more and more information coming out, and I am not stopping because you want to be the highest ranking law enforcement officer in Southern Nevada, and you are a freaking damn disgrace. Now, coming up to 44 minutes, I'm going to shut this down here so we keep it a little under an hour. We already talked about Steve Franks. So much for leadership skills with him. Okay. Now, I'm going to play something over here. This is another video. Short video clip from that same fundraiser in November of 2021. And it's only a couple of seconds. I want you to listen to this.
5 of the 6 years while I was the undersheriff, we went down in every measurable crime category.
Okay. Let me play that again.
5 of the 6 years while I was the undersheriff, we went down in every measurable crime category.
Okay. He's talking to, get me up on the screen here. Okay. Get rid of that for a second. Back over here. Okay. That's Kevin McMahill again, talking to a crowd, fundraising, November of 21. And he's bragging about how the crime statistics under his leadership, because technically, and he says it too, and he ran the entire department. That's what the undersheriff does. He's involved in everything, all the decisions. The sheriff is like the figurehead. He directs all the stuff, but McMahill ran the entire department. Joe Lombardo said, we want this covered up, and he covered it up. Okay, that's just the way it goes. Just like he was when he was covering stuff up for Doug Gillespie. Okay, and Joe Lombardo also, when he was running, when he wasn't running, when he was Doug Gillespie's assistant sheriff and, and all the rank that he had. But you just heard this guy say, he's taking pride that the violent crime statistics went down in 5 years when I was undersheriff. Ladies and gentlemen, he's corrupt, just like Sheriff Joe Lombardo. I want to put something up on the screen. I talked about this. Let me get it up over here. Episode 14. Okay. Okay, that's not the one I want. I'll get to that one in a second. Episode 74. It's going to be 15. I'll get me off the screen here so you could see this. Okay. He just talked about, let me get this banner off the screen here so you can see the full thing here. This is episode 74. When I was talking the other day at podcast, I incorrectly identified my episode 74 as episode 84. So anyway, this is episode 84 from November 14th of 2021. I broke this story. It's never been touched by the Las Vegas media. This was part 1. I had a part 2, and then early in January of this year, I had a part 3. But in essence, got to go back and listen to these podcasts. They're all on the YouTube channel. Okay? The title of this was Vegas Police Ordered to Downgrade Violent Crimes, Falsify Reports. That's episode, get back on the screen here for a second. Okay. That's episode 74. Okay? I explained in that episode, while McMahill was on the department when this was occurring, okay, they were ordering police officers to downgrade the violent crimes of robbery and sexual assault to misdemeanor crimes. So if you have a strong-arm robbery, which is a felony, you put down it was a petty larceny or something else, and you downgrade the sexual assaults for classification purposes, okay? The crimes were still being investigated, but on paper in the classification section, I'm not going to get into the whole thing because it's pretty involved what the police officers told me, they were classifying them as not felonies. So he now is taking, and I said on the podcast, that Joe Lombardo wanted to do that because he wanted to make himself and his department look good, especially when he's running for governor. See, I had all these violent crimes of sexual assaults and rapes and robberies went down when it's total bullshit, okay? They were falsifying the reports. McMahill orchestrated this also with the police sources who spoke to me. He was complicit in this. And now the lying dirtbag, documented liar, pervert, Kevin McMahill, is now using that at his campaign saying, well, 5 years I was undersheriff, some violent crimes went down. Okay? That is corruption, ladies and gentlemen. Again, that is purebred corruption. And one of the podcasts that I did, you heard the professor from John Jay College of Criminal Justice say that when these departments across the country, they get caught doing this, this is a major thing. This is corruption. And then what made it worse, like I said the other day, they reported those statistics to not only to the state of Nevada, but also to the U.S. Department of Justice so they could be used in the Federal Bureau of Investigation's violent crime statistics reports that they send out every 6 months, every year. They knowingly had police officers falsify reports to downgrade violent crimes. And then they forwarded those statistics, those falsified statistics, to the U.S. Department of Justice. And not one news outlet, ladies and gentlemen, in this stinking damn town has even hit on the story that I did. And people are saying, wow, how can this happen? You be breaking these stories and nobody cares. You know, that's not my problem. What I'm saying is this thing happened, and what made it worse, this was the basis for my story. Look at the title. Vegas police ordered to downgrade violent crimes, falsify reports. One cop refused. You know, just for a couple of seconds, I'll talk about it going through the podcast. The cop that refused was former robbery detective Eddie Leneve, who back in 2007, I think it was involved with his partner in the investigation and arrest that led to O.J. Simpson's arrest, and he went to jail, went to prison. It was Eddie Leneve and his partner that worked that investigation. He's got out of, he's getting ready to retire. He went to the airport, because airport duty. A lot of these guys getting ready to retire. They put in for the airport duty. Eddie was going to lunch one day out of the airport. Somebody flagged him down and said they got robbed. It was a strong arm robbery. Instead of calling the unit in that area command, because that's the kind of cop Eddie is, he handled it himself. And then when he went back and he was doing the paperwork at the airport, after it was done, he was told by the sergeant, hey, come back in here and change and he said, no, I'm not changing it. It was a strong arm robbery, is a felony in Nevada. Strong arm robbery is still a robbery. They wanted him to lower it to a petty larceny crime. He refused, got a lot of bullshit over it. And then what the sergeant did, Eddie was pulled into the lieutenant's office. He still refused not to do it, which was the correct thing, because this is a man of integrity. Eddie Leneve, man of integrity, man of honor. So many emails I got when I broke the story from not only Frank Serpico from New York, but cops across the country said this man is a freaking hero, that he told them basically shove it. He's not changing his report. Okay, he didn't change the report. What happened was, according to my sources, is the sergeant opened the computer up because it's all done through computer, and had another officer go into Eddie Leneve's report and change it from the felony robbery, strong arm robbery, to downgrade it to a misdemeanor crime. Okay? And then I did a podcast a couple of podcasts back. You can go on and look at that, and it says, Joe Lombardo ordered deputy chief to harass cop who refused to falsify report. Ladies and gentlemen, okay, let me get me back on the screen here, because I think this is everything that I wanted to get out. If not, I'll be... Okay, turn him over here, okay? 51 minutes. I think I got everything on here. If not, I'll do it into another podcast. But, ladies and gentlemen, this is what's going on in the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. They get away with this stuff. There's no oversight with this police department, because the sheriff runs the police department. He's the highest law enforcement officer. You can't fire a sheriff. If the commission, the county commission would find out about that, they know about it because I'm doing these podcasts, but they can't fire the sheriff. You can impeach him because he's not appointed. He's elected. I'm not getting into that whole thing because there's debates on that both, on all sides. But what I'm saying here, ladies and gentlemen, this is what goes on in the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. Then, McMahill's talking all this nonsense, just like Joe Lombardo. They're so proud of their department. You guys are freaking corrupt. And I did this one. I'm going to hit on this one too, real briefly. This was episode 54. Okay, 14. Okay, here we go over here. This one, get back on the screen here. This is a screenshot of that podcast, episode 54. And I see the date on it, June 10th, 2021. Let me get back up on the screen here, okay? This one was titled, I Broke This Story. This was a 3-part story, okay? Vegas police cover-up uncovered negligence led to kidnapping, rape of 12-year-old girl. I broke that story, June 10th of last year. I did a part 2 a couple months later, and I did a part 3 back in January, I think it was. So anyway, you can get these, go on the site and listen, because these things are kind of complex here. But in essence, this was Sheriff Lombardo and McMahill orchestrated a cover-up with some other high-ranking police officials to cover up the negligence and incompetence in 2018 that led to the rape of and kidnapping of a 12-year-old girl in 2019 because the police officers from the sexual assault unit and the sergeant that were charged with this investigation didn't arrest the suspect when they had all the information. And it's a pretty involved story. I lay it all out. Like I said, that was episode 54. Again, it was a Sheriff Lombardo cover-up with the assistance and complicity of Under Sheriff Kevin McMahill. And Lombardo wants to run for governor. Well, he's running for governor. He is running for governor. He thinks he wants to be the governor of the state. He's a corrupt, incompetent liar. McMahill is also corrupt. He's complicit with these cover-ups. Let me back on here. So anyway, so that's what it is, okay? It's a freaking mess out here, people, you know? And like the cops say, where do you go? You know, there's cops that wanted to talk, you know? But they're so disgusted what happened with that Jamal Rashid, street name Molly Mall, 12-year pimp that was allegedly paying off cops and detectives. Nobody got indicted. No cops got indicted. He was given a bullshit one charge. He was not even a registered sex offender. Cops are saying, we'll never talk to the FBI because they don't trust him. They think the FBI division out here is corrupt, and so is the U.S. Attorney's Office. Now, we have a new U.S. Attorney, and Aaron Rouse, who was running the Las Vegas the Las Vegas FBI division, you know, he retired. But, you know, cops just don't trust the FBI. They say, where do you go when you have these, you know, you want to talk to somebody about corruption and misconduct and stuff that goes on? They're totally freaking disgusted. Just like I said, I turned that event number, one of those event numbers, over to a special agent of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Las Vegas division back around 2010, I think it was early 2011, that I got from a police source, and nothing happened. There was no investigation. Nothing happened. Okay, the leadership of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department for decades are corrupt. They engage in affairs, the sheriffs, with female subordinates. Some of them are notorious drunks, as a lot of people who are close to Kevin McMahill say he is also like that. And this is the person that's running for sheriff. We need to fix this, ladies and gentlemen. We need to fix it. We need to break that chain and put somebody out there that wasn't endorsed by the sheriff, whoever that may be. That's my personal opinion, okay? Listen, it's 22:40 hours, Tuesday, March 29, 2022. I'm going to shut this down here in a minute. Just remember, people, subscribe to my channel, Truth and Consequences with Doug Poppa, if you if you're not, because it's important. Let me get my little thing going over here. Okay. If you can, I know things are times are tough. If you can, support my independent investigative journalism at paypal.me/Doug Poppa. If you can't, that's fine. You know, just if you're not subscribed to my YouTube channel, just hit the red subscribe button and subscribe. All my audio podcast, people like audio podcasts. Sometimes they don't want to look at the video or something, so they're all available, like I said, on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Radio Public, and a bunch of platforms. I have much more coming out that you are never going to hear from the Las Vegas media, okay? Sources, police sources, and other sources within the criminal justice system talk to me. They've been talking to me for years, and I got to get this stuff out. And I'm even thinking about doing more than one podcast a day, like maybe do one in the morning, do one at night, you know. But anyway, this is what it is. Listen, Kevin McMahill, Joe Lombardo, any of the people's names I mentioned in these podcasts, all you have to do is get a hold of me and give me your side. Everybody I talk to, you know. If my sources are lying, which I know they're not, but, you know, giving me wrong information, call me up. I'll get you on the phone. We do an audio podcast, and you come on the podcast and give your side. Because I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, what these police sources have been telling me for years is absolutely disgusting, okay? It needs to stop, and it needs to change. We had for years an FBI division out here that cops say was basically useless. A lot of them think they were, with lack of better terms, in bed with the sheriffs. And the same thing with the U.S. Attorney's Office out here. They don't trust them. So they say, Doug, where are you supposed to go? A lot of them don't even want to talk to the news reporters out here, okay? So I get this information and I put it out. It's a sad state of affairs out here. Hopefully something will change this year, because if it doesn't, and Kevin McMahill's elected sheriff of Clark County, this pattern of systemic corruption and cover-ups and married sheriffs having affairs with female subordinates, and the allegations are out there, and I'm going to have that in another podcast. Kevin McMahill allegedly had extramarital affairs, at least 2 I know of. I know that their names. One I was corrected on the other night. Somebody told me one is now a deputy chief. One went to certain, she got transferred to all the best things that she wanted to be transferred to. Is this the guy we want for sheriff? It's the same pattern, people. It's like, I'm the sheriff, I can do whatever I want. And when I get caught, I'll cover it up. I'll falsify police records. I'll destroy evidence. And that's what they did in Doug Gillespie's case. They went into that computer system and they destroyed evidence of a domestic violence call, according to my sources. I wrote about that in the stories with the Baltimore Post-Examiner. And then they issued a new event number. That is corruption all the way up to the top. I don't know what else I could say. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, 22:43 hours from the Las Vegas desert. My name is Doug Poppa. You've been listening to the Truth and Consequences podcast. Thanks for listening. Ladies and gentlemen, you all have a good night.